October 15, 1944. Dawn was breaking over the dense forests of the Ardennes region in Belgium, where frost covered the fallen leaves like a blanket of silver. Private Tommy Henderson from rural Kansas crouched behind a moss-covered oak tree, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp morning air as he carefully adjusted the worn wooden stock of what his squadmates mockingly called his mail-order special. The other soldiers believed this would be just another routine patrol through enemy territory, confident that their superior numbers and standard-issue equipment would see them through. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would fundamentally change their understanding of skill, precision, and the devastating power of a farm boy who had learned to hunt rabbits at 300 yards before he could properly tie his boots. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What happened next would transform a group of skeptical soldiers into believers as they discovered that sometimes the most unassuming weapons in the most unassuming hands could achieve the impossible. Tommy Henderson had grown up on a wheat farm outside Dodge City, Kansas, where the horizon stretched endlessly in every direction and the nearest neighbor lived 7 miles away. His father, Robert Henderson, had taught him to shoot when he was 8 years old, starting with tin cans lined up on fence posts and gradually moving to more challenging targets. By the time Tommy turned 16, he could consistently hit a prairie dog at 400 yards, and local farmers regularly called on him to help with coyote problems that threatened their livestock. The rifle he carried wasn't some fancy military weapon or expensive hunting piece. It was a 1923 Springfield Model 99 that his grandfather had ordered from the Sears and Roebuck catalog for $12.95, shipping included. The Springfield had been modified over the years by Tommy's father, who had been a machinist before the dust storms of the 1930s forced the family into farming. Robert had carefully adjusted the trigger mechanism, hand-fitted a custom bolt handle, and spent countless evenings fine-tuning the scope mounts, using parts salvaged from other rifles and farm equipment. The scope itself was a 4-power Weaver that had been purchased second-hand from a traveling salesman, its exterior worn smooth by decades of use, but its optics still crystal clear. The stock showed the wear of constant handling, with smooth patches where Tommy's hands naturally fell, and the metal components bore the patina of age, but no signs of neglect. When Tommy received his draft notice in March of 1943, he had requested permission to bring his personal rifle, citing his extensive experience with the weapon and his documented marksmanship abilities. Military regulations typically prohibited personal weapons, but Tommy's recruiting officer, Sergeant Bill Morrison, had been impressed enough by the young man's shooting demonstration to file the necessary paperwork for an exception. The paperwork had followed Tommy through basic training at Fort Riley, Kansas, where his shooting instructors quickly realized they had something special on their hands. Sergeant Frank Kowalski, a career soldier from Detroit who had seen action in the Pacific Theater before being reassigned to training duty, later wrote in his report, "Private Henderson consistently achieves groupings of less than 1 inch at 200 yards with his personal weapon, substantially superior to standard military marksmanship requirements. Recommend approval for field deployment with personal rifle upon completion of advanced infantry training." The report had been co-signed by Captain James Muller, the base's chief marksmanship instructor, who noted that Tommy's scores exceeded those of designated marksmen who had received months of specialized training. Now, 8 months later, Tommy found himself in the Belgian forests as part of the 28th Infantry Division's reconnaissance unit, officially designated as Company B, 2nd Battalion, 109th Infantry Regiment. His squad consisted of 9 men under the command of Sergeant Mike O'Brien from Boston, a veteran of the Italian campaign who had earned his stripes during the fighting around Monte Cassino. The other members included Corporal Dave Jenkins from Texas, a former oil field worker who served as the squad's automatic rifleman, Private First Class Steve Martinez from New Mexico, who handled communications, and 6 other soldiers from various backgrounds across America. The squad's mission that morning was to conduct a reconnaissance patrol through the forests east of the town of Clerf, gathering intelligence on German positions and troop movements in preparation for a larger offensive operation planned for the following week. Military intelligence suggested that elements of the German 5th Panzer Army were operating in the area, possibly preparing defensive positions along the Our River Valley. The patrol was expected to last 12 hours, covering approximately 15 miles of forest terrain before returning to their forward operating base with detailed observations and photographs. "Hey, Henderson!" called out Corporal Jenkins as they prepared to move out from their overnight position, his voice carrying the distinctive drawl of East Texas. "You sure that catalog special of yours is going to hold up when things get interesting? Looks like it belongs in a museum, not a war zone." Several other squad members chuckled at Jenkins' comment, their standard-issue M1 Garand rifles gleaming with military precision and factory uniformity. Private Martinez adjusted his radio equipment and added his own observation. "My grandfather had one of those Sears rifles back in Arizona. Good for shooting jackrabbits, maybe. But this ain't hunting season back home." Tommy simply smiled and continued his methodical weapon inspection, running his hands along the familiar contours of his rifle with the unconscious competence of someone who had performed the same ritual thousands of times. He checked the scope mounts, tested the bolt action, and verified that his ammunition was properly seated in the internal magazine. Each cartridge was a hand-loaded 30-06 round that Tommy had prepared himself using brass cases, bullets, and powder purchased from a sporting goods store in Topeka before his deployment. The bullets were 150-grain boat-tail designs, chosen specifically for their ballistic performance at extended ranges. "This rifle has taken more game than all your fancy military hardware combined," Tommy replied quietly, his Kansas accent soft but confident. "But you're right about one thing. This definitely ain't hunting season." The patrol moved out at 0600 hours, following a game trail that wound through dense stands of oak, maple, and pine trees. The forest floor was carpeted with fallen leaves that rustled softly underfoot, despite the soldiers' attempts at stealth. Sergeant O'Brien took point, followed by Martinez with his radio equipment, then Henderson, Jenkins, and the rest of the squad spaced at 10-meter intervals. The morning air was crisp and still, with visibility limited to about 50 meters in most directions due to the dense foliage and rolling terrain. After 3 hours of steady movement, the patrol reached a small ridge overlooking a narrow valley where aerial reconnaissance had indicated possible German activity. Sergeant O'Brien signaled for the squad to take cover while he studied the valley through binoculars, looking for signs of enemy positions or recent movement. The valley stretched for approximately 2 miles in a north-south direction, with a small stream running down its center and several farm buildings visible in the distance. "Martinez, get on the radio," O'Brien whispered. "Tell headquarters we've reached checkpoint Alpha and we're beginning detailed observation of the target area." As Martinez set up his radio equipment and began transmitting their position report, Tommy found a comfortable shooting position behind a fallen log that provided both concealment and a stable rest for his rifle. He had learned from years of hunting that patience was often more important than accuracy, and that the best shots came to those who waited for the right opportunity. Through his scope, he began systematically scanning the valley, looking for any signs of human activity or defensive positions. The other squad members spread out along the ridgeline, each man finding his own observation position while maintaining visual contact with his neighbors. The morning sun was beginning to burn off the ground fog that had settled in the valley overnight, gradually improving visibility and revealing details that had been hidden in the shadows. Birds were beginning their morning songs, and occasionally the sound of the stream could be heard echoing off the valley walls. After 20 minutes of careful observation, Private Martinez spotted movement near a cluster of farm buildings on the valley floor. "Sergeant, I've got activity down there near those barns," he reported quietly, pointing toward a collection of stone and timber structures approximately 800 meters away. "Looks like someone's moving around, but I can't tell if they're friendly or not." Sergeant O'Brien studied the area through his binoculars, trying to make out details at that distance. The figures were too far away for positive identification, and the morning shadows made it difficult to distinguish uniforms or equipment. Military protocol required positive identification before any engagement, and O'Brien was not about to risk an international incident by firing on Belgian farmers or Allied personnel. "Henderson, can you see anything with that scope of yours?" O'Brien asked. Knowing that Tommy's 4-power optic provided better magnification than standard infantry binoculars, Tommy adjusted his scope and carefully studied the farm buildings, taking his time to examine every detail visible through the crosshairs. After several minutes of patient observation, he noticed something that made his pulse quicken: the distinctive field grey color of German uniform fabric, visible for just a moment as a figure moved between two buildings. "I can see at least 3 individuals in German uniforms," Tommy reported quietly. "They appear to be setting up some kind of observation post in the loft of the larger barn. Range is approximately 750 meters." As if summoned by Tommy's observation, additional movement became visible around the farm complex. What had initially appeared to be a quiet rural setting was gradually revealed as a carefully concealed German position, complete with camouflaged vehicles and defensive positions that had been nearly invisible from their elevated vantage point. The morning fog continued to dissipate, revealing more details with each passing minute. Corporal Jenkins studied the scene through his own binoculars and whistled softly. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like we found ourselves a whole nest of them down there. Count at least 6, maybe 8 individuals moving around. That's a full squad, maybe more." Sergeant O'Brien faced a difficult tactical decision. His patrol had successfully located German positions, which fulfilled their intelligence-gathering mission, but the enemy forces were well positioned and probably numbered equal to or greater than his own squad. Military doctrine suggested immediate withdrawal and reporting to headquarters, but the German position threatened Allied supply lines and would need to be neutralized eventually. Any delay might allow the enemy to reinforce their position or relocate entirely. "Martinez, get headquarters on the radio," O'Brien decided. "Tell them we've identified a German observation post at grid coordinates." He paused to check his map and calculate their precise position. "Tell them we need artillery support or air cover to neutralize the position." As Martinez began transmitting their request for fire support, the tactical situation suddenly became more complicated. From their position on the ridge, the American soldiers watched as additional German personnel emerged from concealed positions around the farm complex. What had initially appeared to be a small observation post was actually a much larger operation, possibly a forward command element or supply depot for German forces operating in the area. "Headquarters says negative on artillery," Martinez reported after several minutes of radio communication. "All available fire support is committed to operations further north. They want us to maintain observation and report any changes in enemy strength or disposition." The denial of fire support left Sergeant O'Brien with limited options. His squad could withdraw and allow the German position to continue operations, or they could attempt to engage despite being outnumbered and at a significant range disadvantage. Standard military rifles were effective to about 400 meters under ideal conditions, but the distance to the German position was nearly twice that range. Tommy continued his patient observation through his scope, noting details about the German position that might not be visible to the other squad members. The enemy soldiers appeared to be establishing a permanent observation post with camouflaged antenna equipment and what looked like long-range radio gear being installed in the barn loft. Several vehicles were partially visible under camouflage netting, including what appeared to be a command vehicle with additional communication equipment. "Sarge, I think I can take some of them from here," Tommy said quietly, his voice calm despite the weight of his suggestion. "Range is long but not impossible. That scope Dad put on this old rifle will reach out that far, and I've made longer shots back home." Corporal Jenkins immediately shook his head in disagreement. "Henderson, that's over 700 meters. Even if that catalog rifle could reach that far, which I doubt, you'd be lucky to hit the broadside of a barn at that distance. No offense, but this isn't Kansas, and those aren't prairie dogs." Several other squad members voiced similar skepticism about the feasibility of long-range shooting with Tommy's civilian rifle. Military training emphasized volume of fire and coordinated unit tactics rather than individual marksmanship at extreme ranges. Most soldiers had never attempted shots beyond 300 meters, and the idea of accurate shooting at nearly twice that distance seemed unrealistic. Tommy understood their doubts, but he also understood the capabilities of his rifle and his own shooting abilities in ways that his squad mates could not. Years of hunting in the wide open spaces of Kansas had taught him to judge wind, estimate range, and compensate for bullet drop at distances that most soldiers never encountered. His rifle had been carefully tailored for long-range accuracy, and he had spent countless hours learning its precise ballistic characteristics. "Give me one shot to prove it," Tommy requested. "If I miss, we'll do things your way and pull back, but if I can reach them, we might be able to solve this problem ourselves." Sergeant O'Brien considered the request carefully. Military regulations discouraged unauthorized engagements, but they also emphasized the importance of seizing tactical opportunities when they presented themselves. The German position represented a significant intelligence asset for enemy forces, and eliminating it would benefit Allied operations throughout the region. After several minutes of consideration, O'Brien made his decision. "One shot, Henderson, but you pick your target carefully, and if you miss, we're pulling back immediately. I'm not going to start a firefight we can't finish." Tommy nodded his understanding and began preparing for what would probably be the most important shot of his military career. He studied the wind indicators visible in the valley, the movement of tree branches, the drift of smoke from a small fire near the German position, and the way morning mist was moving across the landscape. Wind was always the most difficult variable in long-range shooting, and accurately reading wind conditions at the target was essential for a successful shot. The range to the primary German position was approximately 740 meters, according to Tommy's estimation, confirmed by reference to landmarks visible on his military map. At that distance, his 150-grain bullet would drop approximately 36 inches below his point of aim, requiring him to hold well above his intended target. The scope's crosshair system included range-finding marks that Tommy had memorized through years of practice. Wind appeared to be coming from the west at approximately 10 miles per hour, based on the movement of visible indicators in the valley. This would require a lateral compensation of about 18 inches at the target distance, meaning Tommy would need to aim to the left of his intended target to account for wind drift. Temperature and humidity were within normal ranges for October in Belgium, so bullet velocity would be close to standard ballistic tables. Tommy's chosen target was a German soldier who appeared to be directing the installation of radio equipment in the barn loft. The man was clearly visible through the scope crosshairs, moving predictably between two positions as he supervised the work. Unlike the other German personnel who appeared and disappeared randomly from view, this individual presented a consistent target opportunity that would allow Tommy to time his shot properly. "Take your time, farm boy," whispered Corporal Jenkins, his earlier mockery replaced by nervous anticipation. "But remember what we agreed on. One shot, then we're out of here." Tommy controlled his breathing, slowing his heart rate and entering the focused mental state that had served him well during countless hunting expeditions in Kansas. He had learned from his father that the most important element in long-range shooting was not the rifle or the ammunition, but the shooter's ability to remain calm under pressure and execute proper technique despite external distractions. The German soldier moved into position near the barn window, presenting a clear target silhouette against the lighter interior background. Tommy estimated the range one final time, confirmed his wind compensation, and applied steady pressure to the rifle's trigger while maintaining perfect sight alignment. The trigger broke cleanly at exactly 3 pounds of pressure, just as Robert Henderson had adjusted it years earlier in their farm workshop. The shot echoed across the valley like thunder, the sound bouncing off the surrounding hills and reverberating for several seconds. Through his scope, Tommy watched as the German soldier immediately dropped from view, while other enemy personnel dove for cover or scrambled to identify the source of the shot. The bullet had traveled the 740 meters in just over 0.8 of a second, arriving at the target before the sound of the shot. "Jesus Christ," breathed Private Martinez, watching through binoculars as confusion spread through the German position. "I think you actually got him." The effect on the German position was immediate and dramatic. Soldiers who had been working openly around the farm buildings suddenly disappeared into cover, and the organized activity of establishing their observation post ground to a halt. Radio antennas that had been partially erected were quickly lowered, and camouflaged vehicles began moving toward more concealed positions. Sergeant O'Brien studied the scene through his binoculars, trying to assess the effectiveness of Tommy's shot while also watching for signs of German response. Military doctrine suggested that a sniper attack would typically be followed by either a withdrawal to avoid counterfire or an attempt to locate and eliminate the sniper position. "Henderson, can you see what happened to your target?" O'Brien asked quietly. Tommy maintained his position behind the rifle scope, continuing to observe the German position for any signs of his target or evidence of the shot's effectiveness. After several minutes, he was confident in his assessment. Target is down and appears to be out of action. The others are definitely reacting like they've taken casualties. For several minutes, the German position remained quiet except for occasional movement of personnel under cover. The organized installation of equipment had completely stopped, and what had been a confident enemy operation now appeared hesitant and defensive. The psychological impact of accurate long-range fire was often more significant than the physical casualties, as it created uncertainty about the shooter's position and capabilities. "Movement on the right side of the position," Martinez reported suddenly. "Looks like two individuals trying to work their way up the hill toward our general area." Tommy shifted his scope to the right side of the valley, where he could see two German soldiers beginning a cautious advance up the wooded slope. Their movement was tactical and coordinated, suggesting these were experienced soldiers attempting to locate the sniper position and eliminate the threat. The distance was increasing as they climbed, but their approach route would eventually bring them within effective range of the squad's position. "Range to those two is about 650 meters an opening," Tommy reported. "They're moving smart, using cover and concealment, but they have to cross that open meadow about halfway up." The German soldiers were indeed moving with professional competence, using terrain features to mask their advance while maintaining communication with their base position. However, their route up the hill included several areas where concealment was limited, and an experienced hunter like Tommy could predict where they would appear. Sergeant O'Brien faced another tactical decision. Engaging additional targets would definitely escalate the situation and might draw more German forces to the area, but allowing enemy soldiers to approach their position unchallenged could result in his squad being surrounded or flanked. The original mission of reconnaissance was already compromised by the first shot. "Henderson, how confident are you about reaching those two?" O'Brien asked. Tommy studied the approaching soldiers through his scope, noting their movement patterns and the terrain they would have to cross. The range was decreasing slightly as they climbed, which improved his chances. But shooting at moving targets required different techniques than engaging stationary personnel. "I can reach them when they cross that meadow," Tommy replied confidently. "They'll have to expose themselves for about 30 seconds to cross that open ground, and the range will be about 550 meters at that point." The approaching German soldiers continued their methodical advance, moving from cover to cover in a pattern that suggested formal training in small unit tactics. They were clearly not regular infantry, but possibly reconnaissance specialists or experienced non-commissioned officers with advanced tactical skills. Their approach threatened to compromise the American squad's position and potentially call in additional enemy forces. "Do it," O'Brien decided. "But after this shot, we're definitely pulling back. I don't want to be here when they bring up reinforcements." Tommy tracked the advancing Germans through his scope, predicting their route and timing their movement patterns. Long-range shooting at moving targets required leading the target to compensate for their movement during the bullet's time of flight. At 550 meters, his bullet would require approximately 0.6 of a second to reach the target, during which time a running man would move about 6 feet. The first German soldier emerged from tree cover at the edge of the meadow, paused to scan for threats, then began a rapid movement toward the next covered position. Tommy led his target appropriately, compensated for wind and range, and fired his second shot of the engagement. The soldier stumbled and fell halfway across the open ground, causing his partner to immediately dive for cover. "That's two," Tommy reported calmly, as if he were discussing a successful rabbit hunt back in Kansas. The remaining German soldier in the meadow took cover behind a small boulder and appeared to be assessing his partner's condition while also trying to locate the source of the shots. From the valley floor, additional German personnel were now clearly visible as they organized a more substantial response to the sniper threat. Corporal Jenkins, who had been watching the entire engagement through binoculars, turned to look at Tommy with a mixture of amazement and disbelief. "Henderson, where the hell did you learn to shoot like that? That wasn't beginner's luck. That was professional-grade marksmanship." Tommy worked the bolt of his rifle, ejecting the spent cartridge case and chambering a fresh round while maintaining his observation of the German position. "My dad always said that if you're going to take a shot, you better make it count. We couldn't afford to waste ammunition back home, and wounded game just suffers unnecessarily." The tactical situation was rapidly becoming more complex as additional German forces responded to the sniper attack. From their elevated position, the American squad could see vehicles moving within the farm complex and personnel organizing what appeared to be a systematic search of the surrounding hills. The element of surprise that had allowed Tommy's initial success was definitely gone. "Martinez, get headquarters back on the radio," Sergeant O'Brien ordered. "Tell them we've engaged German forces and eliminated at least 2 enemy personnel. Request immediate extraction or fire support." As Martinez worked his radio equipment, trying to establish communication with their headquarters, the sound of engines became audible from the valley floor. Through binoculars, the squad could see German vehicles moving out of concealment and beginning to deploy troops at various points around the valley perimeter. What had started as a reconnaissance mission was becoming a significant engagement. "Henderson, can you see what they're doing down there?" O'Brien asked. Tommy continued his systematic observation through his rifle scope, noting the deployment of German forces and trying to assess their capabilities and intentions. Several vehicles were moving personnel to positions that would allow them to begin climbing the hills from multiple directions, suggesting a coordinated effort to surround the American position. "They're setting up to sweep these hills," Tommy reported. "I count at least 3 vehicles with troops, probably 20 to 30 personnel total. They're definitely taking this seriously." The realization that they were now facing a numerically superior enemy force in prepared positions caused a shift in the squad's mood. What had begun as an observation mission, temporarily complicated by Tommy's long-range shooting, was becoming a tactical situation that could quickly get out of hand. Private Martinez finally established radio contact with headquarters and began transmitting their situation report. After several minutes of communication, he received instructions that would determine their next course of action. "Headquarters says to maintain position if possible and continue reporting on German activity," Martinez relayed. "Artillery support is still unavailable, but they're sending a platoon of armor to assist with extraction if needed. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours." 4 hours was an extremely long time to maintain their current position while facing an increasingly aggressive German search operation. The enemy forces were already beginning their sweep of the surrounding hills, and it would only be a matter of time before they located the American squad's position. Sergeant O'Brien had to decide whether to withdraw immediately or attempt to continue the engagement. The decision was made for him when additional movement became visible in the valley. A German armored vehicle, possibly a reconnaissance car or light tank, emerged from concealment and began moving toward the base of the hill directly below their position. The vehicle was equipped with radio equipment and appeared to be coordinating the search operation. "Henderson, what do you think about that vehicle?" O'Brien asked. Tommy studied the armored car through his scope, assessing its distance, route, and vulnerability. The vehicle was approximately 900 meters away and moving slowly along a dirt road that wound up the hillside. At that range, his rifle could not penetrate the vehicle's armor, but there might be other opportunities. "I can't penetrate the armor at this distance," Tommy admitted. "But if they stop and someone gets out, or if I can see the driver through vision ports, I might have a chance." The German armored car continued its advance up the hillside road, bringing it gradually closer to the American position. As it climbed, Tommy noticed that the driver was occasionally visible through the vehicle's vision slits, presenting a potential target opportunity if the range decreased sufficiently. At 700 meters, Tommy made a decision that would become legendary among his squadmates. Compensating for the vehicle's movement, the extreme range, and the small target area, he fired his third shot of the engagement. The bullet struck the driver's vision port, causing the armored car to veer off the road and crash into a tree. "Holy Mary, Mother of God," whispered Corporal Jenkins. "Did you just disable an armored vehicle with a mail-order rifle?" The effect of the armored car's destruction on German operations was immediate and significant. The vehicle had clearly been serving as a command and coordination center for the search operation, and its loss caused visible confusion among the deployed troops. Radio communication appeared to be disrupted, and the coordinated movement of search teams became hesitant and disorganized. From various positions around the valley, German personnel could be seen attempting to establish radio contact with the disabled vehicle, while also trying to determine the location of the sniper who had achieved such remarkable accuracy at extreme range. The psychological effect of the long-range shooting was clearly affecting enemy morale and decision-making. "Sarge, I think we've got them confused enough to pull back safely," Tommy suggested. "They're going to be real cautious about moving around in the open now, which should give us time to reach a better position." Sergeant O'Brien agreed with Tommy's assessment. The German search operation had been significantly disrupted by the loss of their command vehicle and the demonstrated capability of American long-range fires. This created an opportunity for tactical withdrawal that might not exist if they waited much longer. "Pack it up, boys," O'Brien ordered. "We're moving out in 2 minutes. Henderson, keep that scope on the valley until we're ready to move." As the squad prepared for withdrawal, Tommy maintained his overwatch of the German position, ready to engage any targets that might threaten their movement. The enemy forces were clearly reorganizing their operations, but they were doing so with considerably more caution than they had shown before the sniper engagement. The withdrawal from their observation position proceeded without incident, as German forces were apparently still focused on locating and neutralizing the sniper threat, rather than pursuing immediate offensive operations. The squad moved through dense forest terrain for approximately 2 hours before reaching a rally point where they could safely establish communications with headquarters. The after-action report filed by Sergeant O'Brien would eventually become required reading at several military training centers. In it, he described how Private Tommy Henderson, using a civilian rifle purchased through a mail-order catalog, had single-handedly disrupted a German intelligence operation and eliminated or disabled multiple enemy targets at ranges exceeding 700 meters. Private Henderson demonstrated marksmanship capabilities far exceeding standard military requirements, O'Brien wrote in his report. His personal weapon, though non-standard, proved superior to issue equipment for long-range precision fire. Recommend consideration for specialized sniper training and retention of personal weapon for continued operations. The report was co-signed by Captain Robert Mitchell, the company commander, who added his own observations about the tactical value of accurate long-range fire in reconnaissance operations. Captain Mitchell noted that Henderson's shooting had provided intelligence about German capabilities and positions that would have been impossible to obtain through conventional observation methods. Within a week of the engagement, Tommy Henderson was transferred to the division's newly formed sniper section, where his skills and equipment were put to use in more specialized operations. His mail-order Springfield rifle was officially documented as military equipment, and arrangements were made to provide him with appropriate ammunition and maintenance support. Over the following months, Tommy's rifle would account for 43 confirmed enemy casualties at ranges between 400 and 850 meters. His longest successful engagement occurred during the Battle of the Bulge, when he eliminated a German artillery observer at a range of 920 meters, effectively ending enemy fire direction for an entire sector. The other members of Tommy's original squad, including Corporal Jenkins, who had initially mocked the farm boy's rifle, became his most enthusiastic supporters. Jenkins later wrote to his family in Texas, "I learned something important about judging people by their equipment. That Kansas farm boy with his mail-order rifle taught me that skill and dedication matter more than fancy gear." Private Martinez, the squad's radio man, kept a detailed journal of their various operations, including extensive notes about Tommy's shooting techniques and equipment modifications. Martinez's journal would eventually be used by military training centers to develop improved marksmanship curricula for American forces. The psychological impact of Tommy's long-range shooting extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. German forces operating in the Ardennes region began showing increased caution when moving in areas where American snipers might be positioned. Intelligence reports captured after the war indicated that German commanders had significantly modified their operational procedures in response to unexpectedly effective American long-range fires. Tommy's father, Robert Henderson, received a letter from his son describing the combat engagement and the performance of the rifle they had worked on together in their farm workshop. "Dad, that old Sears rifle worked just like you said it would," Tommy wrote. "The boys here don't laugh at catalog guns anymore, especially when they see what a farm boy can do with proper equipment." The modifications that Robert Henderson had made to the Springfield rifle became the subject of technical analysis by military ordnance specialists, who were impressed by the precision and effectiveness of the civilian gunsmith's work. Several of Robert's techniques were eventually incorporated into official military sniper rifle preparation procedures. After the war, Tommy Henderson returned to Kansas, where he resumed farming and occasionally worked as a hunting guide for visitors from eastern cities. He rarely spoke about his military service, but local veterans knew about his reputation as one of the most effective snipers in the European theater. The mail-order Springfield was mounted above the fireplace in the Henderson farmhouse, where it remained until Tommy's death in 1987. Corporal Jenkins, who had survived the war and returned to Texas, visited the Henderson farm in 1953 while driving through Kansas on a family vacation. He spent an afternoon with Tommy, discussing their shared experiences and the lessons they had learned about equipment, skill, and the importance of not judging people by appearances. "You know, Henderson," Jenkins said as they sat on the farmhouse porch, watching wheat sway in the Kansas wind, "I learned something important from you that day in Belgium. It wasn't really about rifles or shooting. It was about understanding that real capability comes from knowledge, practice, and respect for your tools, not from having the most expensive equipment." Tommy nodded thoughtfully, then smiled with the same quiet confidence he had shown that morning in the Ardennes forest. "Dad always told me that a man is only as good as his preparation and his willingness to do what's necessary when the time comes. That catalog rifle was just the tool. The real work was done long before we ever got to Europe." The story of Tommy Henderson and his mail-order rifle became part of military folklore, told and retold in training centers, veterans organizations, and military history courses. It served as a reminder that effectiveness in combat often depended more on individual skill and dedication than on standardized equipment or conventional approaches. Years later, military historians would note that the engagement in the Ardennes forest represented a perfect example of how individual initiative and unconventional methods could achieve disproportionate tactical results. Tommy's success with his civilian rifle demonstrated principles that would eventually influence military procurement policies and training doctrine. The technical specifications of Tommy's rifle and ammunition were documented in detail by military ordnance specialists, providing valuable data for future sniper rifle development programs. The combination of careful equipment modification, hand-loaded ammunition, and extensive training proved more effective than many officially approved military systems. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.